You ever been to Boston?
No, can't say as I have.
How do you know they don't have prettier trees there?
You got something there. Never thought of it, I reckon.
Dan Blocker was a big personality both on and off the screen, but behind the laughs and his larger-than-life presence was a man with deep scars, private battles, and a legacy that even his son Dirk is still piecing together. But now at 66, Dirk is finally opening up about his father, and what he reveals might just change everything you thought you knew. There wasn't a better actor in Hollywood to play the gentle giant Eric Cartwright on Bonanza. Dan Blocker was a real hoss. And it's wild to think that before that, his biggest role was playing a guy named Tiny on Cimarron City. And let's be honest, Blocker was never tiny, not even as a baby. Born on December 10th, 1928 in DeKalb, Texas, Bobby Dan Davis Blocker came into the world weighing 14 pounds. That's not just big, that's record-breaking. To this day, he still holds the title of the biggest baby ever born in Bowie County. So, in a way, Dan Blocker started life with a little bit of fame, but childhood had its share of heartbreak too. When he was just 4 years old, his 11-year-old sister Aura passed away. After that, he grew up as an only child. His parents, Aura Shack Blocker and Mary Arizona Blocker, eventually moved the family to O'Donnell, Texas, about 40 miles south of Lubbock. Shack had once been a farmer, but the Great Depression took everything from him. Still, he didn't quit. He saved up enough money to open a grocery store, and in the beginning, the family lived in the back of it. Dan helped out wherever he could, carrying groceries to people's cars and doing odd jobs around the store. By 10, school was only half his life. The other half was hard work, riding on a grain truck, keeping up with grown men, sometimes even setting the pace. By 12, he was already a giant, 6 feet tall, 200 pounds. Earning the nickname the Big 'Un in tiny O'Donnell, Texas. Saturday nights, he was in the streets, taking on grown men in bare-knuckle fights, and never lost a single one. At 13, he played linebacker at Texas Military Institute, his talent earning him a scholarship to Sul Ross State. Football opened doors, but the stage stole his heart. At first, he was cast for his size and strength, but the theater got under his skin, and before long, he was on Broadway. But before Hollywood came calling, life had a very different role for him. The Korean War was raging, and Dan Blocker was sent off to fight. As a combat infantry sergeant, he joined Company F, 2nd Battalion, 179th Infantry Regiment, 45th Infantry Division. But even before he reached the front lines, the army hit an unexpected snag. They had to spend a whole month just finding boots big enough for his size 14.5 feet. He landed in Incheon and was on the front lines by Christmas 1951. His unit was stationed in Chorwon, now part of North Korea, holding the Jamestown Line. It was a brutal stretch of the war, months of pushing back and forth, fighting over the same hills, forts, and trenches. For 209 days, Blocker and the 179th Infantry Regiment faced non-stop combat. Finally, in July 1952, the 179th was pulled from the front lines, and Blocker was sent to a hospital to recover from his injuries. His unit moved into reserves, and by August, he was on his way home, Purple Heart in hand. But acting wasn't at the top of his mind just yet. That same year, he married his college sweetheart, Dolphia Parker. She was about 5'3", quite the contrast to Dan's towering frame. They had met back in college, and now that he was home, he chose the responsible path. He went back to school, earning his master's in dramatic arts. With a young family to support, he and Dolphia would eventually have 4 kids, twin daughters Deborah Lee and Dana Lynn, plus 2 boys, David and Dirk. Dan needed a steady job, so he started teaching high school English and drama in Sonora, Texas, before moving on to teach 6th grade in New Mexico. He genuinely loved it. Teaching wasn't just a paycheck, it was something he cared about. But no matter where life took him, acting always had a way of pulling him back in. Even when he moved his family to California to earn his PhD in dramatic arts at UCLA, still juggling teaching on the side, Hollywood wasn't done with him yet. One day, casting scouts spotted him in a phone booth, standing there like the big Texan he was. TV was packed with westerns back then, and he looked like he belonged in one. It wasn't long before he started landing roles, showing up in all the big westerns: Gunsmoke, Colt 45, The Rifleman, Have Gun Will Travel, Maverick. He even did a few movies, but TV was where he really felt at home. His first real break came in 1957-58, when he landed a recurring role on The Restless Gun, playing a cowboy in the post-Civil War era. That led to something even bigger: a 15-episode run on Cimarron City, a show about an oil and gold boomtown in what would later become Oklahoma. When the show got cancelled, it might have seemed like a setback, but in reality, it was the best thing that could have happened, because then he was free to take on the role of a lifetime. If Little Joe was the heartthrob of Bonanza, then at 6'4" and sometimes over 300 pounds, Hoss was the heartbeat, and really the soul of the show. The name Hoss was short for horse, a funny but affectionate nod to his size, big as a hoss. At first, separating himself from Hoss wasn't easy. In an interview, Blocker admitted that in the early years, he was so deep in the role that he was Hoss all the time. He spent so much effort figuring out the character that he couldn't turn him off. But by the 5th season, things changed. Blocker said once he fully understood Hoss, he could leave him at the studio at night and pick him back up in the morning. Blocker knew he wasn't the best-looking guy on Bonanza, but he ended up being the most beloved. Hoss became a fan favorite, especially with kids who saw a bit of themselves in him. He was big and strong, but his gentle heart shined through. Just like his character, Blocker had a real passion for doing what was right. During Bonanza's peak in the 1960s, the cast and crew traveled a lot for filming. One trip took them to the South at a time when segregation was still deeply ingrained. On this particular trip, the Bonanza crew ran into trouble at a hotel. They had booked a large block of rooms, but when they arrived, the staff refused to let their African-American cast and crew stay. Blocker wasn't having it. Furious at the discrimination, he confronted the hotel management and made it clear, if the whole team couldn't stay, nobody would stay. He told them the entire cast and crew would leave and find a hotel that treated everyone equally. In that moment, he used his influence and the weight of Bonanza's popularity to stand up against injustice. Blocker always tried to live by a simple but powerful philosophy. If there was any kindness he could show or any good he could do, he was going to do it. There were no second chances at this life, so he believed in making it count. On set, he was more than just a co-star. He was family. His bond with Lorne Greene and Michael Landon ran deep. They spent long hours together, sometimes from 7 in the morning to 9 at night, 5 days a week. Despite Bonanza taking up so much of his time, Blocker still found time to appear in a few movies. Most notably, he starred alongside Frank Sinatra in Come Blow Your Horn and Lady in Cement. Blocker just wanted to act, to perform, to do what he loved, without all the fame that came with it. But he was just too good at playing Hoss. Bonanza fans couldn't get enough of his character, and soon the attention came whether he wanted it or not. He never liked being grabbed on the street by people wanting to tell him how much they loved his acting. It made him uncomfortable, all the pulling and tugging. He just didn't want people touching him. By the 3rd year of Bonanza, the fame had started interfering with his life in ways that bothered him. One family trip to a baseball game with his young sons, Dirk and Dave, was completely ruined. Fans in the stands kept swarming him for autographs, so much so that he had to take his kids on leave before they even got to watch the game. Even something as simple as taking the family out for ice cream became an ordeal. Fans, young and old, would gather around, excited to see him in person. He once admitted that you never really appreciate privacy until it's gone. And it really bothered him. He wanted to keep his family life normal, to act like fame wasn't even a thing, but deep down, he knew it was a losing fight. Blocker was a devoted dad, always making time for his kids no matter how busy work got. As soon as he walked through the door, he was theirs, playing, roughhousing, using his big 260-pound frame to playfully push his way past them. But Dan Blocker wasn't like most Hollywood stars. He didn't just dislike fame, he ran from it. In 1970, during a family trip to Switzerland, he was captivated by the stunning scenery and laid-back lifestyle. Rumors swirled that money played a role in his move, but that couldn't be further from the truth. Bonanza had already made him a millionaire. Like Gunsmoke's James Arness, Blocker had zero interest in Hollywood's glitz and glamour, so he packed up and settled in Switzerland, choosing peace and quiet over the spotlight. But little did he know, his struggle with fame was nothing compared to the battle ahead. In 1972, Dan Blocker arrived in the US to film the final season of Bonanza, but something was off. He wasn't himself, tired, weak, just feeling downright awful. So he went to the hospital, and that's when they found out he needed his gallbladder removed. Now, a cholecystectomy, that's the medical term for it, isn't some high-risk life or death surgery. It's routine. Every year, around 1.2 million people in the US go through it with no issues. Blocker had the operation, and for a moment it seemed like he was in the clear. After years of battling gallstone pain, he must have felt a huge wave of relief, thinking that chapter of his life was finally over. Everything looked good. He was back home, recovering, believing the worst was behind him. Then, just hours later, everything changed. The dizziness hit, the pain came surging back, and his wife didn't hesitate. She rushed him straight to the hospital. But it was too late. A blood clot had formed, traveling to his lung and blocked an artery. A pulmonary embolism, and just like that, he was gone. Dan Blocker's death was a gut punch. His wife and 4 kids were crushed. His Bonanza castmates, especially Michael Landon and Lorne Greene, were heartbroken. And the fans? They couldn't believe it. He was just 43, at the peak of his career, and then, just like that, he was no more. Losing an actor is never easy, but when they're part of an ensemble, it's different. It's not just a missing face on the screen, it's a hole that never really closes. No matter how much time passes, something always feels off, like a piece of the puzzle is gone. And with Blocker, that absence was impossible to ignore. He wasn't just big in stature, he had a presence that filled the room, a warmth that couldn't be replaced, and they didn't even try. Instead of quietly writing Hoss out with some vague excuse, Bonanza did something no show had ever done before. They made the choice to let the character die too. Lorne Greene put it simply, without Blocker, the show didn't feel the same. He told TV Guide that after Dan's death, he just didn't see how Bonanza could go on. Michael Landon felt it too. He didn't clutter the script with heavy-handed rewrites or long speeches. He kept it simple, adding only a few scenes to acknowledge Hoss's death. But instead of forcing words onto something that words couldn't quite capture, he let silence do the talking. He called it a kind of stillness, because sometimes grief is loudest when nothing is said at all. And that was the truth of it. The heart of the show wasn't in it anymore. Without the gentle giant, Bonanza was never the same. By the time the 14th season rolled around, it just couldn't go on, and for years Hoss's fate remained a mystery. It wasn't until the 1988 TV movie Bonanza: The Next Generation that they finally gave an explanation. Hoss had drowned while trying to save a woman. But what does Dan Blocker's son, Dirk Blocker, have to say about his father's death today? You see, Dirk Blocker wasn't exactly chasing the Hollywood dream at first. Acting wasn't even really on his radar until he started tagging along with his dad on set. With Dan Blocker's busy schedule, finding time together wasn't easy, so the set became their special place to bond. Dirk got a front row seat to the magic of acting, watching his dad and his co-stars joke around 1 minute and transform into their characters in the next. It was like an acting class without the desks. Just by being there, Dirk soaked it all in. The craft, the dedication, the passion. Before he knew it, the acting bug had bitten. It didn't take long before Dirk started landing guest roles, showing up on Little House on the Prairie and later making a name for himself in movies like The Border and Poltergeist, along with TV hits like 21 Jump Street. But acting wasn't his only focus. He even took a break at one point to earn a college degree so he could teach. These days, fans know Dirk best from Brooklyn Nine-Nine, where he plays Detective Michael Hitchcock, the laid-back, snack-loving cop who, along with his equally unmotivated partner Detective Norm Scully, brings endless laughs. But what really catches most people's attention is how much he resembles his dad. Same voice, same look, almost like Dan Blocker never left the screen. At 67, Dirk has racked up an impressive career, popping up in everything from Murder, She Wrote to Walker, Texas Ranger, and even Beverly Hills 90210. He even had a role in Bonanza: The Return, a fitting nod to the show that made his father a household name. Growing up in the shadow of a famous dad might have made him shy away from the spotlight, but talent has a way of pulling you in anyway, and Dirk has carved out his success in Hollywood. Through it all, he's always kept Dan close to his heart. In 2021, he posted a photo of his dad on social media, sharing how much he still thinks about him every day. He even encouraged others to connect with their parents while they still have the chance. Dan Blocker was never about the glitz and glamour. He was a regular guy who put his family first, loved his wife, and stood by his friends. Acting was his passion, but he never lost sight of what mattered most: taking care of Dolphia and the kids. Even in death, he stayed true to who he was. No over-the-top memorial, no extravagant headstone, just a simple grave in a family plot at Woodman Cemetery in DeKalb, Texas. The marker simply reads, Blocker. Small, unassuming, easy to miss among the grass and dirt. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed it, please like, subscribe, comment, and turn on post notifications to stay updated with our latest content.